I will call a bit. Listening and sitting through your meeting took me back to Johannesburg, to the meetings of the COSATU Local, where basically every meeting of the workers is a fighting council. That's about fighting to improve the lot of workers. I appreciate you having given me the opportunity just to listen to how workers in the US, how workers in the Bay Area are trying to build their struggles, are trying to build their solidarity on the daily issues that they face. For that I say viva to workers, viva. What that kind of spirit does to me is also to remind me of what Nelson Mandela had said to a meeting of COSATU, the Trade Union Federation in South Africa, in September 1994. Remember, this was some 6 months after he had been elected president. He said to COSATU and his Congress, if the new government does to you what the apartheid government had done to you, then you must do to it what you did to the apartheid government. Again, for me, that speaks to even someone like Mandela recognizing the need for workers to fight on, particularly in a situation such as we've seen in Marikana, in the Platinum Belt, in the Gold Belt, in the Coal Belt, but also now in the agricultural districts, where the most exploited workers in South Africa, mine workers and farm workers, are coming out and saying, no more to exploitation wages, no more to starvation wages. In the case of mining, there's about 2,500 companies, mining companies in South Africa. Only 500 of them legally report and declare their profits. Last year, government's own reports showed that at least $40 billion was not declared and was leaving the country illegally as mining profits that had not been declared. That already shows the extent to which many of the workers' demands would be met. Because if the workers' demands at Marikana and in the other platinum mines were met for a living wage, what it would have meant would have basically been something between $2,000 and $3,000 as a monthly wage that workers were demanding. Taken together, that would come only to about 10 billion rands a year. Mind you, I'm saying these same mining companies have got 40 billion rands that they shipped out of the country unreported. This just explains and shows how even after the 1994 democratic elections in South Africa, you still have a situation where the same Anglo-American, the same London mining company continue to profit from significant mineral resources that country has, but also primarily from cheap black labor. This remains the story to this day. The strike we saw breaking out some 2 weeks ago in the farming districts in the Western Cape is only calling for something like $20 a day that workers are demanding as a first step towards moving to something like a living wage. Now, unfortunately, our government, the government that we voted for, has not been able to look at, to stand side by side with workers and look at the bosses in the face and say the democratic dividend, if there's such a phrase, also means that workers must earn a living wage. In fact, instead of the democratic dividend that flows to workers, what we've seen in South Africa is the democratic dividend that has freed South African companies of the shame and blame of apartheid. Now they can go and invest elsewhere in the world without the shame and blame of apartheid. So this is a sad fact that was confirmed not so long ago when government released its census figures for last year. The census figures that were released in October show very clearly that the lot of black workers in South Africa has not improved that much since 1994, even though there's been 18 years of a democratic government. So when those workers went on strike from August 16th up to the farm workers' strikes of the last 2 weeks. What we are striking against is exactly a situation whereby a few continue to benefit from the labor of many, and a few continue to benefit from resources that should belong to society as a whole, particularly mineral resources, but also land. So I'm standing here in front of you to say the struggles of those mine workers, the struggles of those farm workers are similar to the many issues that we are debating this evening. But also, it's not just exploitation at work, it's not just low wages that those farm workers are facing, that those mine workers are facing. It is also the brutality of the police. What would happen in the US if 34 workers on strike were mowed down by the police? I do not know what would happen. But in South Africa, what that caused was huge anger, huge grievance, and a huge outcry that led basically to people to ask a number of questions. How can Mandela's government, how can our own political party do this to the very black workers who vote for it every year, every election since 1994? This is a big question because many more reports have come out now to show that actually the police are so brutal, not just against striking workers, but against thousands of people who come out every day to protest against poor service delivery, against evictions, against service cut-offs. So this problem of police brutality is actually another feature that reminds us of the past of apartheid. Again, the farm workers, when they went on strike over the last 2 weeks, 3 of them were killed simply because they went into the streets and protested and demanded a living wage. So what you were discussing earlier about Alan Bluford is now being repeated in South Africa when it comes to suppressing worker and community protests. The South African Police Service for this year reports that 2012 has seen the largest number of what they call crowd management incidents, basically attempts by the police to suppress and close off community protests. This basically speaks to the crisis that South Africa faces. Despite 18 years of democracy, we have not been able to change the economic situation in that country. What that means for people in the US, particularly those who are active in the anti-apartheid movement, is actually to stretch a hand of solidarity across the seas to the oppressed, to the exploited workers. Because those oppressed and exploited workers, it is them who shaped the outcome of the democratic contest in 1994. It is them upon whose shoulders the future of South Africa depends. And the future of South Africa will also determine what happens to the rest of Southern Africa, to the rest of Africa. And your support, your solidarity, through your resolution that you passed this evening, is very crucial because it will send a strong message to those workers that they are not alone in their struggle for a just South Africa. And I'm very thankful, therefore, that you've passed the resolution in the manner that you did. As the Mirakana Support Campaign, one of the things that we are doing is to follow very closely what the Commission of Inquiry is doing. You may not have heard this. The police have now been ensuring that most of the witnesses who go and speak to the Commission of Inquiry are followed, harassed, and in a number of cases, they have even been arrested. This is going to be having a negative impact on the quality or even the boldness or the courage of many more witnesses, because how can they appear if they are going to be harassed, if they are going to be arrested? So as the Mirakana Support Campaign, we've been recording, documenting, and even mobilizing resources to ensure that the families of the mine workers and the remaining mine workers have legal support, have psychological support. Thanks to the resources we have received from unions and other organizations in South Africa and outside, we have been able now to have the full transcript of the Commission of Inquiry up to now. But we are not convinced that the Commission of Inquiry will be enough. That is why we support the call by the Trade Union Federation, by COSATU. COSATU has said it wants a full Commission of Inquiry that can, for once and for all, expose the social, economic, working, and living conditions of mine workers. According to COSATU's call, that commission should expose and explain why mine workers still receive the same wages that they received in 1946, taking inflation into account, even though we've had a democratic government since 1994. So colleagues or comrades, as we say in South Africa, all I want to say to you is that your resolution, it does not only inspire someone like myself who's close by to you for the next few months, but when I send it back home, those workers are going to realize the need for working class power, the need for working class solidarity, but also the need to continue sharing in the struggle as it moves forward. To conclude, the wave of strikes we've seen since August in South Africa has also been a very clear rebellion against policies that the new government adopted. Those policies basically said, we want South Africa to compete internationally, we want these companies to be global. But as it said so, as it adopted such policies, what it did not say is that the basis for global competition must be global labor standards. Government did not say that. And these workers now are beginning to say there is nothing competitive about the starvation wage. There is nothing fair or just about the starvation wage. So, comrades, I want you to recall this very clearly, because there's been an attempt in the media to say that the mine workers, the farm workers are demanding the impossible. And when we look at the figures,
what role, if any, did Cyril Ramaphosa, who used to be the head of the Mine Workers Union, who's now a multi-millionaire, played in this? Is he on the side of the bosses or what?
For everyone's benefit, Cyril Ramaphosa is a lawyer. He was one of the founders of the National Union of Mine Workers in 1982. For the 10 years that he was General Secretary, the Union of Mine Workers was very militant and fought valiant struggles in defense of workers' rights, and actually wrote, so to speak, through workers' struggles, wrote the new Labor Relations Act that we have after 1994. I'll give a bit of his history, a bit more. After the NUM, he was then elected to become the Secretary General of the African National Congress, Mandela's party. From that position, he then led the ANC team that negotiated the new constitution, the very new progressive new constitution. So he's a very major political figure. If everything goes according to his plan, in December he'll be elected the deputy president of the ANC, which means in 2014 he'll be the president of the country. So he's a very, very significant figure in our history. At the mine in Marikana, the London mining company, Lonmin, where the 34 workers were shot, he is a major equity holder, a shareholder in that particular company. He also has a separate company that provides outsourced, contracted labor to the same company. At the Commission of Inquiry, about 3 weeks ago, one of the lawyers for the dead mine workers released an email that he had been able to find, an email from Cyril to the Minister of Police and CC'd to the CEO of Lonmin in London. The email said, those people who are striking on top of that mountain are not workers but criminals. I request you to take concomitant action. Those were his words. Before that, he had bought from, what I didn't say earlier on is that after he left active politics, he then got offered huge shares from all sorts of companies, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, mining companies, banks, and so on. So he's one of the very few black owners of capital in South Africa who are quite active. A few months before the Mirakana massacre, he bought a buffalo calf for something like $2 million. And now, so he's quite an active figure politically and in business. So that is the role he has played by employing outsourced labor to Lonmin, but also by being a major shareholder in Lonmin and using his power as a shareholder basically to say, if you pay higher wages to the workers, then our profits will be affected. So that is the story of Cyril Ramaphosa.
Great. Okay, thank you very much.
The one trade union that has broken away from the NUM is called the Association of Mining and Construction Union. It's still very small. Now there have been attempts by a number of comrades back in the country to say the struggles of the mine workers are the same. There are understandable reasons as to why maybe people may be unhappy with the NUM, but those struggles of the workers must not be undermined by the fact that there are two unions. More importantly, though, than the two unions has been the emergence of worker committees. Basically, those strikes that you saw were led by worker committees, even amongst farm workers. By the way, amongst farm workers, there's low level of unionization, only 3%. So the worker committees have actually emerged as very important players to organize the most important workers in South Africa who are normally not properly organized. Now, the COSATU is quite concerned about this because it's still correctly so assess the importance of unions. That is why then its General Secretary tried to bridge the gap between the NUM and the worker committees. And it's still a long way to go though to see how these worker committees will develop. Because these worker committees were saying, we are not sure about the NUM because it did not represent us so well. We're also not sure about the new union. We do not want our demands to be sacrificed because there may be a contest between two unions. However, after the strikes have settled now, there's recognition that there's need to build worker unity. And I think various efforts have been undertaken in that regard.
Interesting story. Okay, Jack, one more.
Yeah, Jack Heyman, Local 10 back in 1984 actually took action in solidarity with the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa, and we struck against the ship here in San Francisco. So what's the best way for trade unionists today to show solidarity with the struggle that's going on in South Africa?
Your resolution, I think, is an important step that builds solidarity across the seas. In my view, in my analysis, the struggles of workers in South Africa are going to continue and are likely to become more bitter in the next few years because government has still not shown the political will to meet workers halfway. So I think South Africa is a place to watch. South African workers' struggles are actually going to be an important agenda item for the next number of years. What that may mean from time to time is things such as monetary support, or if we can trace the platinum back all the way to the Auckland port, I do not know if we can do it, and then possibly asking the port workers there to refuse to load platinum, basically. That could be one other possible action. But as I'm saying, rest assured, the fighting workers of South Africa are not about to give up the fight.
The fight is ready. Thank you, Judge Conrad.